once again. And I think Mr. NG Ayuk did a very, very good job on that opening remark. This is going to be a very interesting panel as well, where we speak to natural gas and climate. We all know this is a burning topic right now, where we have to ensure that whatever we do keys into the climate agenda. So I'm going to call on my panelists, and as usual, please a round of applause as I bring them up stage. And first of all, the first person will obviously be the chairman of Africa Energy Chamber, NG Ayuk. Please join us on stage, sir. Join us on stage. A round of applause for him, please. You're welcome again. Thank you so much. I will also call on the Managing Director of Argentil Capital, Mr. Gbenga Hassan, to also join us on stage. Mr. Hassan, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And joining me as well is the Managing Director and CEO of NLNG Ship Management Limited, Mr. Abdulkadir. Ahmed, Mr. Abdulkadir Ahmed, you're welcome. So a round of applause for him, please. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You're welcome, sir. Thank you. And I will also be joined by the Commercial Manager, ND Western Limited, Mr. Sunday Okunbor. Mr. Sunday, yes, you're welcome, sir. A round of applause, please. Thank you for joining us today. You're welcome. So I have my panel.
All right, just before they get started, I can see the gentlemen are ready, and we're ready to hear too. Please let's call the breakout session, the country spotlights. South Sudan, you're having your spotlight now. It's on mineral exploration and mine opportunities taking place at Bailey Hall. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we kick off the panel, and this is one very interesting topic. Maybe one of the queries we received that we're gender biased, because we're all men. But please, apologies to everyone for that. But still, it's important that we speak to matters that have to do with climate change and how Africa as a continent we position ourselves to key into that agenda. We know we have natural resources, but we have to be able to drive conversation, our perspective, which is why I'm really pleased with your presentation, Mr. Ayuk. It really speaks to the matter. And I'll start from you, Mr. Ayuk. So looking at gas as a resource in Africa, from your experience, how do you think Africa can better commercialize this particular resource? Today we know there's a lot going on globally. We see the Russia-Ukraine crisis. We see how that has change the narrative when it comes to demand for energy resources. And we have this abundance in Africa. Are we keen in, are we prepared to take opportunity? What can Africa do better to harness its gas resource? Yes, you can use your best mic.
Thank you on that. I think the Russian play has really redefined gas monetization in the continent. I know there is always that big discussions, and I get all these questions asked, how do we get gas to Europe? I think the question that we're not asking is, how do we get gas to Africa? How do we get gas to Africans? Because at the end of the day, you're talking about getting gas to someone who already has enough power, enough industrialization, enough development. What about the people in this continent that do not have any access to gas? But now we have to look internally. Our gas infrastructure is really not there. So if you're going to look at pipelines, we need to be looking at doing more inter-African pipelines, as we discussed. I was with my brother, the minister from Chad, and he said one thing: Chad is more closer to Nigeria, 200 kilometers, but there is no connectivity when it comes to pipelines and with that. So we have to, number one, focus on that infrastructure, because if you have all the gas and the gas is in the ground, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't have any value as long as it's in the ground. It's the above ground gas that will make sense. But also we have to look at those above ground risk issues. We need to look at how we invest in infrastructure to get gas around Africa. And this is really a key critical item. Of course, you have to send gas to international markets. But those international markets should be able to pay for it and not just walk around, as we've seen the Europeans doing over the last 3 months, walking around the area of their country and saying, give us gas, give us gas. They need to invest in this stuff. You know, there's something you always say, put skin in the game. If we don't put skin in the game, then, and put skin in the game early on, then it's going to be very difficult. Gas can really shape it. There are various ways you can move gas. Because Greenville NLNG as a sponsor of this event, one of the key things they've been able to do is move gas around Nigeria or around regional markets. We need to look at a lot more on this program, but think big. But there's also something which I would like to add with that. We need to also take care of around the security issues around gas. It is not correct that Mozambique had a big gas discovery in 2010 and 2022 we're still struggling about how to get that gas out of the ground and get it to market. We need to start thinking differently and how we deal with these resources. It's going to help us to monetize it faster, better, and even in a cleaner fashion, because of course gas is the cleanest form of fossil fuels, and it could really drive our own future. Look at the gas byproducts, urea, ammonia, NPK, fertilizer plants. You could use that to really transform a lot of our economies across the continent. That's why we should never give up on our potential to make gas as our own future. And even whether you want to call it transition fuel or whatever, because we're going to have 2 billion people in Africa in 2050. These 2 billion people is going to be a big demand. If you look at the OPEC and outlets, you see demand is going to reduce in OECD countries, but demand is going to rapidly increase across Africa and the developing world. How are you going to provide energy for 2 billion people if you're not using gas? I still question the possibility of solar and wind to provide that. I would go with my whole time range of that gas.
Thank you so much. Round of applause, please, for that. I think you ended on a very, some people will call it a controversial, because, you know, it depends on the fora you are in, on, you know, what sort of energy source really is of the future. So I will keep that conversation. I'll probably bring it up again. Well, I want to stay on this infrastructure challenge, because you've rightly identified infrastructure to be very critical to this gas commercialization. So I will take this question to Mr. Abdulkadir Ahmed. When we look at infrastructure, you know, keying in from your experience, you know, running the NLNG, and how we can yes this Pan-African infrastructural framework. I mean, if you listen to what Mr. Ayuk said, he said, we're talking about supplying gas to Europe. Have we discussed supplying gas to Africa? From your perspective, what do you think we need to do to bring and improve on this infrastructure challenge across Africa, not just in Nigeria? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was hoping you would call me after my brother here. So I think it's important, as he has said, at the end of the day, it's one thing to have gas sufficiency or gas availability in the ground. It's another thing to get it to the market. And the use of gas is really about how effective you are in getting it to where it is needed. Okay? Now, infrastructure by its natural inclination is an African gas market. And And for me, it's quite important. We're talking of 600 people, 600 million people, or even more than that, in energy poverty. But Africa has gas availability. And as my brother has said, it's important to use what we have to really move our people out of the state that they are in. And if it requires us harmonizing the gas market in Africa so that we can actually create a viable industry that can sustain the right kind of infrastructure required, then so I think it's important we do that. I manage NLNG ship management, which is basically the entity that manages all our vessels and the terminal and trying to get LNG to the market. But I've always told people that LNG in itself is just a means of transporting gas. Right? So it's either you transport it as liquefied, or you transport it as natural gas, but you still need to transport it. You need to transport it and you need to store it. You need to make it available to where it is needed. And it boils down to that framework of the 4 A's. It's about making gas available, it's about making it accessible, it's about making it affordable, but most importantly, it's also about making it acceptable to our people. Financing is always going to be a challenge, and for as long as we keep waiting for others, we'll always play that that game. And I like the concept of really putting resources together to see how we can get ourselves started. But we do have the gas. And really, beyond sustainability, it's really about developing and moving our people out of the poverty trap. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. A round of applause from yeah, so I think it then also kind of drives that conversation further when you bring it kind of a bit home to Nigeria for now. And we're looking at that area that you talked about, that it is acceptable, to the people. Right now, even in Nigeria, we're having various usage for gas, various resources, even in our power sector. You see hydro, you see gas playing a key part in it. People have different perspectives. But when we look at it from a Nigerian context, if you allow me to take that, there's been a lot of conversation on gas. But are we seeing that traction? I would like to take that question to you, Mr. Ajuk. Looking at it from a Nigerian context, we've had discussions around gas. Nigeria has made a net zero commitment by 2060, and gas is part of this, strategy. What, in your perspective, has been that traction made locally from the gas space? Are they learning points? Are they things that we need to do? From the private sector, what has been your experience?
Yeah, thank you. I think a lot has actually happened in the last few years. The conversation is how we can deepen this, the usage of gas. From our own perspective, as the company we work with, we've done a lot to take gas to the doorsteps of our customers. From where we operate in the Niger Delta, 134, Okunbor gas supplies gas basically to the power sector from that end. And we are proud to say we are one of the leading suppliers of gas to the power sector from that angle. We currently generate about 350 million scf of gas per day, which goes all the way from Delta to Lagos. We also take this gas to West African region, to Ghana, Togo, and Benin, with the help of the network, the West African Gas Pipeline Network. Now, the question around how we can deepen this is because of infrastructure. We need infrastructure to actually move this gas into where it is needed. And as we know today, there is a replacement for that. Where there are no infrastructure in terms of pipeline, there are virtual pipelines through what Greenville is doing today. We know that with Greenville and people in that space can actually take this gas up to the northern part of Nigeria, to get this gas. Yes, we know AAK project is coming up, but again, for them to meet those needs now, because we need gas to be able to move our economy forward. We need gas to be able to generate necessary revenue, and also we need gas to provide jobs. A lot of our youth are not gainfully employed. With gas penetration, we will be able to generate these jobs. Let me give an example with what Greenville is doing with these trucks. Every truck you see Greenville push over, there are so many support services to make that happen. And that's what we're saying. They have a multiplier effect. For every time we push gas out, there are several jobs that comes with it. So we need to deepen this conversation to make sure that this gas gets to where it is needed. Thank you.
Round of applause again, please. Thank you so much for that. And I think we all agree that infrastructure, the infrastructure issue with gas is something that as a continent we need to speak to. And I think it goes outside of this forum. We need to be able to have different conversations, ongoing conversations on how we deepen the infrastructure across Africa. I think that's very well said. Another matter would then be how do we fund it? That's a key question. How do we fund, the gas project? There are several conversations here and there. We have the Central Bank of Nigeria also coming in to play in this particular sector. But I would like to direct that question to Mr. Gbenga of Argentil Capital. From your perspective, what sort of financing arrangement could be beneficial for this sector? Either as individual companies, as partnerships, what have you seen? What do you think would work for this sector? And I would like you to speak to it for Nigeria and within the African continent. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks for that. Just to add my 2 cents, I don't think we should be having a conversation, a debate about whether gas is a clean fuel for us. Right? I think in this part of the world, we should just accept it that gas is a clean fuel for us as Africans, and we should just get on with how do we get that gas into the market, right? Again, I think the whole climate and gas issue just, confuses the point. But to your specific question, how do we solve the issue of the infrastructure deficit and essentially the funding that needs to go into the sector? I think it's been alluded to the fact that the challenge with gas, getting gas into the market, is how do you actually transport it, right? And the cost of doing that generally means that there's an upfront capex cost, and that upfront capex cost is quite significant. And then at the end of the day, you have to find a way to ensure you recover that. So one of the challenges that we see is the fact that traditionally it's taken a very long time to fund. We look at the NLNG projects, for example, it takes a long time to fund those projects. That is not because the funding isn't there, it's just that the funding wants to see the fact that there's a buyer who's going to offtake that gas, right? Because nobody wants to put in $1 billion into a project and then is struggling to find a buyer for it. So financiers want to see that end-to-end contract in place. Now, one of the challenges Nigeria, taking Nigeria for example, faces is the fact that one of the biggest consumers of gas is power, right? The power sector. And unfortunately, our grid sector isn't financially bankable, if I can use that word. In terms of if you put your money in, you get concerned about you getting paid at the end of the day. And there are various things that the government is trying to do through metering and funding, etc., the transmission company and all of that, to reduce the losses and ensure that when people supply gas to the power sector, they actually get paid for it. Because at the end of the day, like I said, every financier thinks, how do I get a return on my capital? To get a return on my capital, I need to ensure that whatever I fund, I can see the fact that whoever is doing the work gets paid. And that payment is sufficient to pay me as my as the funder. So, but again, I think what we need to think around is the fact that we shouldn't wait for the big projects, right? We don't always have to wait for the big, massive, centralized projects. And I think one thing that we did at Argentil was to say, okay, we like the gas sector, we are a fund that has a certain amount of capital, how can we provide funding into that sector? And we actually created a portfolio company called First Modular Gas Systems. And what we essentially do is we buy gas that is flared, and we essentially convert that into CNG and LPG right now, and then as we expand into mini LNG. And essentially the idea is to essentially reduce flaring. So from a climate perspective, big tick for us. But more importantly is to take this gas into the market, into the local market. So we are actually closer. So we don't have to rely on the challenges of imports that we all know happens to Nigerian ports, etc. We're producing this locally and ensuring that it gets to the market. And I think, you know, some of the points that you raised around the supporters, and I think you didn't mention the NCT.
Because you're talking about gas infrastructure is going to hurt the environment. Why are we not debating if solar or wind infrastructure is going to hurt the environment? Why does it have to be gas turbines are going to hurt the environment? So you need to rephrase the debate. They're talking about looking at Niger, Senegal, even Chad, great green hydrogen potential with the potential of building a pipeline and shipping green hydrogen into Europe. It's going to be a pipeline. Who is talking about that green hydrogen infrastructure and the environment? So I don't accept that question because I think you're asking for an answer that it's already answered. They should be answering that question. We in Africa, we should be industrializing very fast. We should be ramping up operations and really getting people to work. A lot of people don't have jobs. That's the honest reality. So let's stop this conversation about whether this hurts the environment or not. We should be talking more about how do we finance gas infrastructures and everything. The Financial Times did a big interview with them yesterday. The only thing they could find to quote me on is to say drill, baby, drill. Of course, we need to drill more, but we need to drill with carbon capturing solutions because it's criminal to even think that you're going to abandon so much gas in the ground because of environmental concern. Let's use carbon capturing technology. It exists. Focus on that. You had probably, I mean, I'm 42 years old. I used to know when we used to have a phone in the house where you put your feet on it, you turn it around. Young people now don't know it. Look at how human civilization has moved so fast where I got my daughter asking me for a cell phone. We should be looking at technology instead of saying shut things down. We shut all down all infrastructure during COVID lockdowns. What happened? You still didn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Europe when there was a global lockdown. So you tell me we have, because gas is going to be a problem on the environment and the infrastructure, let's shut down Africa. I already have 600 million.
no electricity. What more is there to shut down? When you are down, there's nowhere to go but up. And if you're the gold, stop digging. The only hole we need to dig is to dig more pipelines and put gas infrastructure and get people jobs. That's what everyday Africans want.
Thank you so much. Round of applause. You always end on a controversial note. You know why I said so? Because that controversy around those who know telephones are old, I will disagree with you. Anyway, so you see the conversation is quite interesting because now the fact staring us in the face that Africa cannot by itself develop, unfortunately. We need funding from these markets that are driving the narrative. So you have oil and gas in Nigeria, for instance, that are investing and chasing a green energy narrative, right? So we can't develop the resource, we need the funds. World Bank is saying, I'm not going to fund fossil fuel, I think it's part of those things. Look at it. The question is, this is still a fact staring us in the face. We need to do something about it. Let me take that question to Mr. Abdulkadir. Yes. From your perspective, same conversation. Gas infrastructure, impact on the environment, and I've now added the impact of the world outside of Africa and the importance of that narrative to market and go-to strategy. What would be your response to this?
So let me try and be less controversial.
Yeah.
Fact, we do have an environmental issue locally. Fact, we do have a developmental issue locally. Now, the question I always say is, why does it have to be a zero sum game? Why does it have to be one or the other? Why can't it be? I think, for me, being a gas person, the reality is, and we keep hearing this concept of gas being a transition fuel into the future of the carbon zero environment. I think the reality is beginning to look like, it's not just simply transition fuel, it's also destination fuel. But most importantly, from our perspective, when you talk about the environmental pollution, or the potential environmental pollution of gas infrastructure, the pipeline, ask a mother who has to cut down trees, cook firewood, and all the health implication of all of that. I think that's where we're coming from. It's really about making energy available to those who need it the most. I think even when we look at the developed world, I think looking at Europe, and I've dealt with European companies for the past 20-something years that trying to sell them gas. And they started from the concept of diversification. And then they left that. But then the Russia-Ukraine crisis has really brought it back. And now, what you're beginning to see is energy security. So my point of view is simply pointing to the fact that between energy poverty and availability, energy security, and sustainable environment, it's not a zero-sum game. It's something that has to be looked at collectively. Yes, we're not saying gas is the best, but we're saying it actually is the best of what we have today. And it is available, and it's potentially affordable. but most importantly, we also recognize the impact, the immediate impact that it can have in terms of developing our environment. So yes, we do have a global challenge, which is the environment, but I think it's important that in really addressing that global challenge, we should not also forget that solutions can actually be local. And part of localizing solution is really looking at the peculiarities of our environment and asking ourselves, vis-a-vis where we are and where we want to go to, what's the fastest way of getting there? And gas is definitely one of it. The infrastructure in itself isn't the issue. It's really about how we go about operating it. It's about the regulations that we put in place. It's about ensuring how do we create an efficient operation, which requires, of course, policies, policies and monitoring to ensure that parties operating in that environment operate with the best possible, in the best possible way. And if we can do that, then I do see gas as actually being part of the solution. Because if we can truly industrialize, move our people from where they are today, then we'll reduce felling of trees, we'll reduce cooking with firewood, and that in itself is tremendous in terms of addressing the environmental pollution challenges that we're facing. So that's really my point of view, and not to make it controversial, but I think it's about really all of us coming together. Yes, there is a financing issue, but I've always said, again, we have a common problem. It's about really addressing that common, bringing out that commonality between ourselves and the people so that we see it effectively and understand that it's not one or the other, but it's all gathered possibilities put together.
Thank you so much. Next item, again, please. I think the panel is really treating this conversation really well. And so I think the financing matter then comes back to the fore around people are running away from financing fossil fuel. What then is the way to go for Africa? How can we harness local financing and in a way that we are still able to drive the narrative while recognizing this challenge, which we've been able to speak to? Is there a way in which we can still drive that long-term financing without necessarily relying on financing coming out of Africa? I think still speaking to this particular matter around infrastructure and environment affecting this finance bit. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks. So again, I think I guess it's a very interesting question, and I think one thing that we always need to look at is what is it that we're trying to solve, and I think part of the conversation that's been said or been alluded to here is the fact that we shouldn't allow the developed world to decide the narrative for what are we trying to solve. Africa has its peculiar challenges, and in order to solve those challenges, it needs to look at what best suits it. Because to be honest, the developed world is looking at what suits them, right? So it's a very unfair world, really. So as Africans, we need to look at what best suits us. And strategically right now, the honest truth is solar doesn't solve our problems. You can provide somebody one light bulb, solar lamp, and be proud of it if you sit in the developed world, but we know that doesn't really mean much here, right? At the end of the day, I think the VP penned an article where he said it's very important that we don't look at solving the energy deficit by providing solar bulbs. We look at solving the energy deficit by providing energy that is and can be used for productive uses. Because that is what we want here in Africa. We want to use energy for productive uses. The hairdresser wants to have energy so that she can do. The barber wants to have energy so he can cut. The organizer wants to have energy so he can pump tire. The market woman, the pepper grinder, we all know these things, right? They need a form of energy that is beyond just a solar bulb. So the reality is that we can't wait for technology and battery storage and all that's required to make the whole solar renewable solution cost effective to be at that level. We need to use what resources we have today, and part of those resources is gas. And I think if we make that case continually, people will listen. But if we cower and say, okay, yeah, because you say we should use solar, we go out and just run and start looking for solar bulbs and solar lighting, and believe that that's the solution, then we're doing ourselves a disservice. The reality is that, yes, you're right, the development finance institutions have shied away from funding fossil fuel. But if we're speaking development finance, in fact, we have a development finance provider that is chasing us to give us money because they say you're stopping gas flaring. So my point is that if you change the narrative and let them know what you're actually solving, because reducing gas flare, trust me, solves a lot more than putting solar bulbs around the whole place, right? Because you're reducing direct, and then you're displacing diesel, you're displacing more polluting liquid fuels by using gas. So the point is, the narrative is very important. So it's always important that when sponsors are going out to raise money, they arm themselves with the right narrative such that, I'm not saying overtly challenge what the other person is saying, but you get them to understand what it is you're solving. And I think the way you couch it is very important, such that, because at the end of the day, these are development finance institutions. They want to say they're doing good. So you have to make them look good as well, right? So you have to show them that what you're doing makes them look good as well. Now, but I think I alluded to the point around domestication of capital, and I think when we had the initial speech, the chair of the chamber noted what Afrexim and APO are doing. We need a lot more like that. We need to have African institutions who are funding oil and gas projects because they know the pain points. They know why it's important to fund it. And the reality is that capital follows capital. So if local capital is funding these projects, you will find institutional development finance and international capital that will come in because they will see the benefits, they will see the returns. So we need to spend a lot more time trying to find ways to ensure that we have more domestication of capital, and like I mentioned, obviously there are sources that are helping with that. But we need to find ways to catalyze more of that local domestic capital. Because at the end of the day, even though we say we don't have enough local capital, we still have some of our local capital who go and invest in the US and the UK and everywhere looking for returns. If you are able to show them those returns here, they will invest here. So again, I think it's really just focusing on the fact that, one, what problem are we trying to solve in Africa? Our problem is different from the developed world. Can we use technology to make gas and fossil fuels more cleaner? Yes, we can. That's the point. I mean, this debate about green hydrogen and blue hydrogen, I just don't understand it. And I mean, you take blue hydrogen from gas and they say, oh no, we want green hydrogen. It's just, so my point is that but if you're not armed enough to make that case, then they defeat you because they use superior terms and knowledge perceived to make you look, oh, you don't really know what you're saying. But if you know what you're saying, then you can challenge them as well. So the reality is that we should be looking at doing a lot of blue hydrogen. We have the gas here. We shouldn't just focus on green hydrogen. We have the gas here. We should use blue hydrogen. And if we need to put in more carbon capture, we put that in. It's all about technology. And the funny thing about technology is the more you use it, the cheaper it gets. So the more we invest in technology into our fossil fuel development, the cheaper that technology will become. And over time, we will get to being carbon neutral by that. So it's very important we don't just keep the narrative as my colleague here noted, either or. It has to be holistic. And when we make it more holistic, then we can solve that problem and see. And I mean, we're alluded to the fact that look at what technology has done for the telecom sector, right? Where our kids, I mean, my son is home and all he disturbs me is, oh, the internet isn't working. That's all he disturbs me for. I mean, in my day, during halftime, you were out playing football or stuff. So the reality is that technology has made cost of doing things a lot cheaper, and what we should be focusing on is looking at how we can use technology to make oil and gas production, and all related activities more energy efficient, and then we will get to net zero. That's the reality. But again, if you're talking net zero to 60% or whatever country you're in who don't have access to energy, you're just wasting your time. Because these guys are not interested in what net zero is. They're interested in how they're going to grind their pepper, how they're going to go to trade, how they're going to make money, really. So it's very important to be situated in that narrative.
Thank you so much. A round of applause, please. Thank you so much. I did know we were out of time. I really enjoyed the conversation. So I'd like to thank my panelist, Mr. Okunbor from NGOs. Thank you so much for being here. And also Mr. Ayuk, the chairman of Africa Energy Chamber. Thank you so much for very, very good contributions. And also Mr. Ahmed, NLNG Ship Management Limited. Thank you so much for being here as well. And also Mr. Gbenga Hassan, Managing Director of Argentil Capital. Thank you so much for your contributions as well. A round of applause for my panelists being in front of this week. And thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to moderate.